Okay. Listen, I'm sorry about the technical difficulties, but as long as you can hear me, that's okay. So I do appreciate you all coming along this evening, taking a bit of time to listen to what I have to say. A lot of questions I've been getting in and around things like moving on, growing confidence, things like that. So I had been promising for quite a while to do a live stream. Thought I could get it working. But this evening, what I would like to talk about is some of the questions that come around, that come about as regards moving forward. Things like building confidence, things like tapping into your own sense of self-efficacy. Now, that's just your, if you will, that's your own sense of power, your ability to affect outcomes, to move in the direction that you want to set your own goals. Okay. Also looking at things like self-esteem. And what I would like to end with at the end of what seems to be a podcast, I'd like to end with giving you 3 questions that can help you to problem solve. Okay. Now these questions might sound easy. They're not that easy to answer, and they can bring up a lot more questions and a bit more thought. But that's not a bad thing, because the aim is to help you to think a bit differently. Okay. Now, I'm thinking of this in the context of someone who has maybe been in a difficult situation, a difficult environment, a difficult relationship. They've been in the company of people who maybe constantly criticize them, who just seem to want them to aim for the floor, don't want to lift their head. Maybe after a while, things like confidence and so on are being affected. And even if they're out of that environment, that can hang around for a long time. If you think of some of the videos I've done, the impact of things like narcissistic abuse and bullying. So the first thing I would like to say is, when we're talking about self-confidence, it's about understanding what we mean by self-confidence. Now, self-confidence is one of those things that we think confident people are kind of like James Bond. Okay, nothing goes wrong for them. They can handle everything. When truth is, confidence is something very different. Confidence can be, if you will, it's like a state of mind. And when we put the word self in front of something such as self-confidence, self-esteem, I think it's more about what we think others think of us and how others are treating us. As I say, if someone keeps wanting you to aim for the floor, if they're constantly criticizing you, this is going to have a huge impact on your confidence and your esteem and so on. And to make a point, if you imagine someone on an island, desert island, there are thousands of miles from anybody, there's no one near them. Chances are they are not struggling with self-confidence. They're not struggling with self-esteem. There is no one there for them to compare themselves to. There's no one there to criticize them. So you think of that as that state of mind. And recognizing as well, again, it's not like being James Bond or whoever, because confident people can feel uncertain. Confident people don't have all the answers, and they don't succeed at everything. And we all have different levels of confidence in different areas. A champion athlete, for example, might not be able to boil a kettle. We all have different levels. Recognizing as well, when it comes to those things we put the word self in front of, some people are going to criticize and challenge no matter what. They're going to have a go at you. They're going to make fun of you. They're going to ridicule you if you fail. But they're going to criticize you, and they're going to scorn you if you succeed. So sometimes it's having to recognize those kinds of things. When it comes to change, when it comes to moving forward, confident people don't necessarily expect massive changes immediately, because they recognize it's a process, and that confidence is going to fluctuate in different situations. There's times we're going to feel super confident. We've got this. It's not a problem. Maybe it's something we do every day. Then there are other times when maybe we feel a bit out of our depth. So it's going to fluctuate. Confident people as well, they don't necessarily fear failure. Now, that doesn't mean they're fine with failure. It doesn't mean they're okay with failure. but they don't necessarily fear it, because let's be honest, sometimes we have to fail in order to learn. We have to learn what doesn't work, to identify what went wrong, so that we can go about it differently. And it's also, again, going back to the self-efficacy and so on, it's setting small steps, small little goals to be able to move forward. Now, what those goals are entirely up to you. But even if that goal seems like a massive one, you break that down into small pieces. What can get you a step closer? Now, just because something is difficult, by the way, doesn't make it impossible. And sometimes not right now, not ever. Sometimes, as I say, it's a process. It's things we have to work through. Now, something else I brought up was, or something else that had been brought up that I was going to talk about, was resilience. Now, there's a difference between resilience and endurance. Because again, you might have been in that situation, it might have been that work environment, it might have been that unhealthy relationship, and you had to endure a lot. You had to go through a lot. Resilience is different. Sometimes resilience, I would think of it as maybe our ability to endure. Resilience is our ability to, what do you call them? Yeah, one of the Rocky movies, I think it was Rocky 17 or whatever it was. He described it brilliantly. It's not how hard you get hit, or it's not how hard you can get hit. It's the fact that you can keep getting up again. Resilience, doing the little things we can to build resilience in order to be able to endure whatever it is we have to go through, to move towards those goals. Now, that's where we talk about things like our self-care. Just things like our rest, things that help us recharge, a bit of time out. Doing things in our own best interest, leisure activities, hanging out with people that bring out the best in you. Yeah, they might tease you from time to time, but there's no malice in it. And they're fine whenever you tease them. And sometimes it might even just be taking a break. Something as simple as a cup of coffee, lying on the sofa for 10 minutes. Whatever it is, the little things we do to help us recharge. The other things that help with our resilience is paying attention to the small little victories. Because there was a guy called DeShazer. He came up with a therapeutic approach, solution-focused therapy. And he believed there are always exceptions. Because we will say things like, it's always this, it's never that. No, the truth is there are always exceptions. There are times when we succeed. There's times maybe we just got to get away by the skin of our teeth, or we just about get through it. But one way or another, there are always exceptions. And it's worth paying attention to those exceptions, because we can build on them. What worked, again, what didn't work, we can learn from that, not do that again, change our approach. With the exceptions, what did work well? What can you build on? What did you find gave you that space to recharge so that you could go back to face whatever it is you had to do? So like I say, difficult is not the same as impossible. It means learning. Now, another way to learn and to build your confidence and your resilience, because things can seem overwhelming sometimes, especially when we're stuck. We feel as if we have nothing. We're lost. Maybe the other person won. They get a promotion. They get to keep the house, whatever. Life is so damned unfair. But that does not mean all is lost. When you're facing things that you're finding really difficult, and it might bring up a lot of anxiety, it might bring up a lot of stress, it might bring up a lot of distress, putting yourself on a scale. I know it sounds a strange thing to do. Put yourself on I'll clarify what I mean by scale. I don't mean weigh yourself. Put yourself on a scale. 0 being, say you're fine, you're grand, not a care in the world. 10, perhaps you're at your wit's end. Okay, so this could be bringing up a lot of distress. Now, you put yourself on that scale and you put yourself on it honestly. You might be a 5. And that could be reasonable for the situation. You might be a 5, for example, if you're going for a job interview. That is going to bring up a normal level of anxiety. But wherever you find yourself on that scale, even if it's quite high, maybe it's an 8 or a 9, what we often do is we're thinking of what takes it away. What gets me out of this? How do I best avoid this? I think that's human nature. What gets me out of this uncomfortable situation that's bringing up this uncomfortable feeling? The question isn't always what gets me out of it. The question could be what could help me get through it. So you put yourself on that scale, and even if you are quite high, maybe you're an 8, you ask yourself, what would make it just 1 point easier? What would reduce it by 1 point? Or if you want to do the scale the other way around, what would improve it by 1 point? What would give me more confidence? What would make it feel a little easier? What you're doing is you're tapping in. Pardon me, I'm choking here. You wouldn't think I was a smoker. What you're doing is you're tapping in to, again, those inner resources that you have. You're building on exceptions. What worked last time? What didn't work? What can I rule out? I often think of what can I rule out? What didn't work last time? I'm always mindful of this lecturer I had many years ago. He was asking about if at first you don't succeed. You imagine a room full of students where we've all got our hands up saying, yeah, absolutely amazing, try and try again, that's right. And he just sighed and asked, who the hell tries the same thing over and over again? If it didn't work the 3rd time, why do you think it's going to work the 10th? So you're looking at what's going to be different. Can you change your approach? Now, when you use those little skills, wherever it is you are, you pay attention as well. How long does that feeling last? Because it might come like a wave. You might feel overwhelmed, but it might dissipate. It might dissipate after 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It might dissipate after you go and do something in your own best interest and then come back to think about it. When you choose to think about something, by the way, do you ever notice you've got more control over it? You can think more in a problem-solving way. When we get caught up with things that are really difficult, I think that's when our imagination kicks in. We start to catastrophize, assume the worst. So you think of what might even give you that 5 minute, that 10-minute break, and then come back to think about it. And you think about it with a sense of control. You keep building on what's working, ruling out what doesn't. Now, you may have people around you, and there may be people around you who can give you good advice because maybe they've tried something, learn from them, what worked for them and what didn't. It doesn't mean you have to necessarily follow their advice, but you might just learn something from it. Recognize as well that there are those people, as we talked about earlier, the last thing they want to see is change in you. They maybe prefer you the way you are. They prefer someone who's easier to control, shall we say. So you might see you, you might see whatever it is they were doing, you might see that ramp up a gear. You might even see a change in approach. So you pay attention. What's in your best interest and what isn't? Meet yourself where you are and build on it can be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming. And Tony Till, you've just made a point there. You've just asked something. You've said about it being overwhelming. You're right, it can be overwhelming. And the reason why it can be overwhelming, there's many different reasons. Sometimes we have so much. We have so much going on. It can feel as if we're firefighting in all directions. Another reason why it can feel so much is because we're overthinking things. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't think about things, but I'm talking about overthinking things. We're overanalyzing things. And every time something happens, that reminds us of the previous time and the previous time. And we can feel as if we're right back there. When we're overthinking things, we're either thinking of something that happened yesterday, last week, a decade ago. And our brains don't like things that don't make sense. That's why I think we replay things. We relive situations and we're trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. Or we are thinking of something from tomorrow, next week, and we're thinking about it in a way that we're risk assessing, we're mitigating, we're trying to cover all the bases. If he says this, then I'll say that, and if she does this, then I'll do that. We're trying to keep ourselves safe. We could even find ourselves in someone else's head, trying to figure them out. What's their motives? What's their agenda? Why the hell would they do this? And what did he say to her about that other thing? Our mind is all over the place. And when it comes to trying to find a solution, when it comes to trying to problem solve, when it comes to trying to make sense of it, it's really difficult to do. Now, I have never done this before other than with someone right in front of me, but who would be interested in doing a little exercise just to show you something to try and make a point? Anybody up for that? Well, give it a go anyway. I'd like you to pay attention because I would like you to start counting in your head. And it doesn't matter what number you get to, just keep on counting in your head, okay? Start counting now. What's your name? Answer it out loud. Your full name, middle name as well, if you have one. What's your date of birth? When's your birthday? When's the last time you were at the cinema? What did you go and see? Was it any good? What was it about? What kind of music are you into? What's your favourite song? Why that song? How does it go? Sing a little of it. It's a silly exercise, but what I'm trying to show you is that we can't do both. You cannot count in your head and answer questions at the same time. And that's often what happens when we're feeling overwhelmed. It's like we're counting in our head and we're trying to answer questions at the same time. So it's maybe trying to slow that counting down a little bit. When our mind is stuck in yesterday, stuck in someone else's head, or stuck in tomorrow, we can't really be present. And when we're not present, we can't really problem solve. We will be thinking of maybe the most expedient course of action as opposed to the best course of action. Now, if I remember right, I should pay more attention to my own content. If I remember right, I think I did a video previously where I was talking about just little ways to ground yourself. Now, some people find things like mindfulness helpful. Some people have different grounding exercises. They have apps on their phone, and that's grand. I'm kind of pragmatic. I'm a big believer in whatever works. Sometimes we don't always have the time to do an exercise. So what you can do is you can just pepper your day with little things to remind yourself of what you're doing right now. For example, right now I'm brushing my teeth. Right now I'm having a coffee. Right now I'm going to whatever. You remind yourself of what you're doing right now in this moment. You can also, when you get into that habit, you can also go a little bit further. Right now I happen to think, or right now I have the thought. You acknowledge it for what it is. It's a thought. Now, I'm not telling you the thought's not important because I've no right to say that. No one has that right. But acknowledge it's a thought. In and of itself, it has no power other than what you give it. You can choose to think about it, or you can choose to let it go. Come back to it whenever you're ready, whenever it suits you. You can even acknowledge, right now I happen to feel. Acknowledge the feeling. A lot of times we'll say anxious, or we'll say stressed, or we'll say angry. Try and go that little bit further. I feel uncertain. I feel tired. I feel threatened. I feel a lack of control. When you're doing that, you're naming it, you're also owning it. And the key term each and every time is right now, because a lot of our thoughts, a lot of our feelings and things like that, they are of the moment. We may be triggered by something, we may be reminded of something. Sometimes it just comes over us like a wave. But when you're acknowledging that it's right now, again, just like on that scale, how long did it last? You notice it dissipates. You're not kicking against it and you're not trying to avoid it. You're putting yourself back into the present. Go back to doing whatever it is you were doing. When you're in the present, as I said, it's easier to problem solve. It's not always a question of what gets me out of this or how do I best avoid it. Sometimes the question is what could help me get through it. Sometimes the question is what might I need? What could be useful? Sometimes we can even ask ourselves, why is this even important right now? This is something that could be dealt with later on. But like I said earlier, I can't tell you whether or not those thoughts or those things are important or not. Only you can discern that. Some things do maybe need our immediate attention, but we can still explore our options. As I say, you can practice those little things just to ground yourself. Even when you don't need to, you just pepper your day with little things like that because whenever you need them, it's like practicing anything. They might be easier to use. They might work a little bit better whenever you need them. The other thing, again, tapping into your self-efficacy and so on, you think of some of the thinking habits that we have. I mentioned earlier things like catastrophizing, the worst case scenario, mind reading, jumping to conclusions based on how we feel. When we recognize, sorry, I've just seen something here. I think the no camera is a happy accident. Darren ASMR. I've recently just learned what ASMR means. Okay. Okay. Thank you. It's the thing, I didn't know I had an accent until I started hearing other people talk, but then, sure, there you go. Where did I get to? Yeah, it's the thing, just like everybody else, my mind seems to wander. Yeah, we were talking about being in the moment. Whenever you practice those little things, even if you don't need to, whenever you do need them, they'll be there for you. Now, again, going back into the moment, our unhelpful thinking habits can take us in many different directions. And a lot of the time, if you will, it's our imagination. Now, I don't say that to anything or criticize it all, but a lot of time it is because we're creating worst case scenarios. When we're a bit more in our imagination constructively, how to keep a newly set boundary, please. Okay, Amanda, that's a really good question. Boundaries is something that I'm going to be talking about. So if you bear with me, I will get to that. Now, pardon me. Using our imagination constructively, I know this might sound a bit egotistical, but it's like imagining yourself to be the hero of your own story. It might sound a bit fantastical, but you can imagine whatever it is you're going through, whatever it is you have to face. It might not be easy. And again, you might not be handling it like James Bond, whatever. But you can create a scenario where you're the hero of your own story. You can imagine yourself getting through it. Imagine how it would look if it were resolved. Again, it's another one of the Shazer's kind of approaches when it comes to solution-focused work. You're imagining your preferred outcome. Now, one of the questions came up, I will come to that now, was the question about the boundaries. I think the first thing is to recognize, pay attention to what your boundaries are. I think of boundaries like your house. If you were to leave your windows and doors open, people are going to come in and do whatever they want. You'll come home from work and your house is empty. They've taken everything. You'll come home and people are sitting on your sofa, your couch. They're watching your television, eating your chocolate biscuits. You leave your windows and doors open, people will take advantage. If you keep your windows and doors locked all the time, no one is ever going to get in. But then you're not going to get out. You think of your boundaries like your house. You have the key. You're the owner. It is entirely up to you who comes in and who doesn't. It's up to you whether or not you open the door, or whether you keep people at the door, whether you invite them in. Boundaries do not always have to be rigid. They can be fluidic. Your boundaries may change in different situations and with different people, but there will be, if you will, red lines. Now, if you set a boundary with someone, that person crosses that boundary. Again, everybody's different. Sometimes you can give someone the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they just forgot. They never thought. They were just being thoughtless. So you have to recommunicate that. You have to restate it. If someone is repeatedly crossing boundaries, I would argue they're not actually crossing them. They're actually violating them. How you reinforce your boundaries is entirely up to you. But one way or another, in order to reinforce a boundary, you have to show a consequence. That consequence is entirely up to you. That consequence could be the lack of engagement. That boundary could be no more contact. That boundary could be withdrawal of privilege. But even then, if that other person changes, you can be flexible again. It is entirely up to you. The thing about narcissists, it comes up, it's questions I get asked on my channel all the time about narcissists and so on. You're right, and it's mentioned in the comments here. Narcissists generally don't like boundaries. They like to have control. But they're just like everybody else. Nobody necessarily likes consequences, but they understand them. It also takes, in order to reinforce a boundary, as I mentioned earlier on, it takes confidence. Remember, confident people get it wrong. Confident people struggle. Confident people feel nervous. So we don't necessarily lack confidence, lack confidence to set our boundaries. We can, but we can feel that nervousness. We can feel that anxiety. We still have to practice. We still have to try it somehow. Yeah, they punish anyone who goes against their rules by lying to everyone about you. Yeah, they do. That's right. And let's be honest, it hurts. It really does. Some of the things that we hear about ourselves. But what I would say is saying a thing does not make it so. Okay, I did a little exercise with you earlier, counting in your head and trying to answer questions. This isn't so much an exercise, but these are going to be the dumbest questions you've ever heard. It's about what things people say, the things people say about us. If I called you a helicopter, would you be one? If I told people you were a helicopter, Would you start to change? Would your DNA change? Would you start to grow propellers? Now, if anybody's saying yes, I'd be very curious how that happens. Saying a thing does not make it so. Now, here's the third question. How would you feel about getting called a helicopter? You could feel anything. You could feel bewildered, embarrassed, angry, confused. I'll hazard a guess you wouldn't feel like a helicopter. It's not that it doesn't affect us, but it's trying to put it into a context. Saying a thing does not make it so. If other people believe it, they're not interested in your side. Maybe they don't ask. Yeah, that still hurts. But we can't control what other people think. The most we'll do is influence them. We can show them something different. One way or another, they will make their own minds up. Now, this is the thing you're talking about, narcissists and they're spreading rumors. Don't forget, the people that they spread rumors to, sooner or later, they start spreading rumors about them. Sooner or later, people expose themselves for what they are. Spixie Cat, the question about the helicopter, I'm just making a point that saying a thing does not make it so, does not make it true. That's all. I just choose helicopter. It could be anything. I could say unicorn. Just making the point that saying a thing does not make it so. And even if other people choose to believe it, that still does not make it so. There are those who probably aren't going to believe. There are those who probably will say, well, that's not, you don't come across like that to me. Whatever it is they're saying. But those that do want to collude, well, maybe you want to ask yourself, are they the kind of people you want in your life? And besides, there are some people out there who will believe whatever they want in spite of all the evidence against it. Now, I got a bit sidetracked there because I'm talking about boundaries. How we communicate our boundaries. Now, you think of the different ways we communicate. Now, we can communicate passively. We're looking at our feet. We're mumbling. We're maybe speaking softly. We can communicate aggressively, using criticism, bad language, interrupt the other person, talking over the top of them. Chances are, if you've been in a situation with people who are very toxic, very nasty, that's how they've communicated with you. Assertive communication is different. Being assertive, you're clearly stating what the boundary is. You're not being ambiguous. You're also clearly stating your needs and your wants. You're making eye contact, standing with your back straight. You can also listen to the other person without interrupting them. Wait till they're finished. And then disagree with them. Sometimes being assertive is repeating the same thing over and over again. You might sound like a broken record. For those of you from the analog age like me, a broken record, you're just saying the same thing over and over again. You're not getting caught up in debate. You're not getting caught up in how unreasonable you're being, how unfair you're being. You just keep saying the same thing over and over again. I will not be doing that. I don't think that's in my best interest. Doesn't matter what you come back with or what they come back with. I will not be doing that. I don't think it's in my best interest. And they come back with something else. I will not be doing that. That is not in my best interest. We might sound as if we're being irritating. But what we're doing is we're not engaging. You're right, Pink Diamond. They will call you things. And I think, again, going back to boundaries, you think of boundaries as what's mine and what's yours. I think you could sum them up with what's mine and what's yours. Okay? Just like someone calling you a helicopter or whatever, it changes nothing. That is their stuff. You do not own that. And they have no ownership over you, what you think, what you feel. They can criticize it, they can challenge it, but they don't own it. And if you decide to change your opinion, change your view, change whatever it is, that is entirely your choice because it's your stuff. These things are easier when you have a bit of help and a bit of support. Yeah, people find counseling very helpful. People find things like support groups. There's forums and things like that. But even just developing healthy kind of relationships with other people. They don't have to be your best friend. They don't have to be a new partner. They don't have to be a new family. All they have to be is someone who listens to you, someone who pays attention to you, someone that'll disagree with you, but not in an overly critical, judgmental way. Those healthy relationships can help. Do you remember we were talking, well, rather I was talking about being a bit more in the moment? You can be a bit more in the moment with people that you're feeling comfortable with because you're not being guarded. You're not being vigilant. You're not waiting for the next attack. So you're able to be that little bit more in the moment. It can also help, as we said earlier, can help with your resilience. You can feel recharged because there's people out there who value you. Now, I'm mindful of the time, and I did promise 3 questions. These 3 questions can help you to problem solve. These 3 questions can help you explore your options. They're not, they sound like simple questions. They're not necessarily that easy to answer. But these are questions I would sometimes ask and if I was using solution-focused work. Whatever it is you're dealing with, whatever it is you've been through, whatever it is you are going through, the first question you ask is, can I change it? Now, we need to be honest with ourselves. There are some things we cannot change. We cannot change the past. We cannot change other people. When it comes to the future, I think the most we'll do is influence it. Just like other people, the most we'll ever do is influence them. So you ask, can I change it? Even explore what change actually means. What would change look like? How would it feel? What would you do with it, even if you had it? And when you think of the things that maybe you can't change, then you start asking, what can I change? For instance, whatever it is, can you change how you feel about it? That sounds like an odd question, especially if something hurts like hell or something absolutely terrifies us. We can't necessarily change how we feel it, but what we can do, again, things like being confident. It takes trying to be a bit more confident. That's not always easy to do. Can you change how you feel about it? Well, it's a very age-old kind of therapeutic approach that whenever we expose ourselves to the things that we feel uncomfortable with, that fear, that discomfort starts to dilute. It doesn't go away, but it dilute. It stops having such a grip on us. So, if you will, we start to become more confident. Our comfort zone starts to widen, more courageous. But we do that in little, small, measured ways. I always say, if you're afraid of the water, do not jump into the middle of the Atlantic just to see what it's like. You're not going to help anyone, least of all yourself. little, small, measured steps. And those little, small, measured steps, sometimes they can be easier with the assistance. If you're working with a therapist, they can really help with that. When you take those little, small steps, you might begin to change how you feel. As I say, the feeling doesn't go away, but it dilutes. It stops being so gripping. Another question can be, can you change how you think about it? Not change what you think, change how you think. Again, we will catastrophize, we will mind read, we will jump to conclusions. We can think about the same thing, but we think about it in a way where we're thinking more perhaps about an outcome, the outcome we would prefer. We could be thinking about the past, ruminating over the past, and we keep asking questions like, why? Why this? Why did they this? Why did that? Why do they keep whatever? Thinking about the same thing differently. How do they do it? When did they do it? What was it they actually did? So you could be thinking about the same thing in a different way, rather, giving yourself a sense of control. Can you change how you behave towards it? Now, you might be feeling nervous, you might be feeling anxious. You stand with your back straight and you make eye contact. You start to look confident. Other people maybe start to see that. And as you start to look a bit more confident, you might start to feel a little bit more confident. You might be able, or you might start to think a little more confidently. Thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all linked. One small change in just one of those areas, being consistent and being patient, learning from what works as well as what doesn't work, you begin to see a knock-on effect in the other two. As I said earlier about that lecturer, if it didn't work the third time, why do you think it's going to work the 10th? Can you change your approach? Can you change direction? Change means a lot of things. Just because there are some things we cannot change does not mean there are some things that we cannot. But change is only the first question. The second question is, and I think this is the one we all struggle with the most, can I accept it? Now, acceptance is a difficult thing. And I think the reason why we find acceptance so difficult is because it's not quite what we think it is. Sometimes we'll think acceptance is just resigning ourselves to the fact, and it could well be. But let's look at what acceptance isn't. When we accept something, it doesn't mean we're okay with it. It doesn't mean we're fine with it. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, and it doesn't mean it doesn't matter. When we accept something, we're acknowledging it is what it is. We are where we are. Where do we go from here? I like to paraphrase my two favorite Carls, Carl Jung and Carl Rogers. To paraphrase Jung, he said whenever we accept something, we're free to change something. In other words, we're not kicking against it anymore. We're not in denial. Carl Rogers, he said that whenever I accept myself just as I am, I'm now free to begin to change. Again, accepting it doesn't mean we're okay with it. Again, a lot of questions around narcissism. Narcissists find it difficult to accept things, which is why I think, and I could well be wrong, this is why I think they keep doing the same things over and over again. Captions. Can I put captions on? Tell you what, if I can't put captions on, I certainly am going to put them on by the time this gets uploaded. I was going to say, yeah, we're not kicking against it anymore. When we stop kicking against it, we've accepted it, and then we can look at what to change and how to change, whatever that change happens to be. And the last question, can I just leave it alone? Can I just let it go? Again, that could be very difficult, especially when it hurts like hell. But when we decide to let something go, doesn't mean it didn't happen. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Doesn't mean it's not important. All we're saying sometimes is, I am not going to allow this to eat away at any more of me. I am not giving that situation, those people, that person, they are not going to waste any more of my time, any more of my resources. That's all we're saying. Now, when we decide to let something go, I think we've accepted it. And when we've accepted it, we're free to change something. And the thing about those questions, as I say, they may bring up more questions, which isn't necessarily a bad idea because you're thinking more in a solution-focused way. Where do you need to get to? Where would you like to get to? And the answer isn't always yes or no. Can I elaborate on the difference between acceptance and letting it go? That's a good question. Maybe it's how I phrase it. Acceptance, again, when we accept it, doesn't mean it's okay. We're just acknowledging it is what it is. When we decide to let it go, what we're saying is, I am not going to allow this to consume any more of me. Does that make sense? I hope anyway. Yeah, I'm not going to allow this to take up any more of my time, any more of my energy, any more of my resources. If you will, it's the difference between caring about and caring for. It can mean a lot of different things. That's just how, in the context of those questions, that's how I would differentiate the two. But also, the answers to those questions might not necessarily be yes or no. Sometimes the answer might be not yet, not right now. Can I change it? Not right now. Because I don't know what to change. I don't know how to change. I don't know what I would do with the change. I don't know what the preferred change would be. And that's okay because that is allowing yourself to explore. Can I accept it? Not right now. I've not been able to process this. This has been too hurtful. Can I just leave it alone? Can I let it go? Not yet, because I haven't fully explored my options. Just say, it's not always a yes or a no answer, but they are aimed at helping you to think just a little bit differently. These questions, these techniques that I've been talking about, as I said, they are easier if you're in the company of people who are supportive. Again, if you're in therapy, if you have people around you who care. I think it's when we feel isolated. This is not true of everybody. Okay, a lot of what I say is not true of everybody. There are always exceptions. But when we're hurting, we tend to sometimes isolate ourselves because we can't get our head around what's happening or what has happened. And when we isolate ourselves, I think that's when we get stuck with our own thoughts. That's when we start creating narratives. That's when we start worrying. That's when we start to overthink things, overanalyze things. Can you move forward without closure? I'm sorry, I'm only picking up on questions as I go. I struggle to multitask. Okay. I'm trying to get questions. Can you move forward without closure? It really depends on what you mean by closure. For some people, especially if we've been really badly hurt, closure might mean some sense of justice. If we get some sense of justice, then maybe it's easier, but it's what does that justice look like? And also, the sad thing is about the world, it does not work the way it does in TV shows because sometimes the other person wins. Wins in the sense that, let's say, maybe they get a promotion. Maybe they win the lottery. Maybe they get to keep the house. That really adds insult to injury. Sometimes the good guys, I hate saying this, but sometimes the good guys don't win. They don't win immediately. I'll add that caveat. They don't win immediately. Now, anybody who watches my videos, you can't see me tonight because I can't get the damn camera to work. But anybody who watches my videos, you see in my little cabinet behind me, I'm a little bit of a sci-fi nerd. One of my favorite movies of all time is The Empire Strikes Back, and I will tell you why. I think it's a perfect illustration of real life, albeit it's sci-fi, but it's a perfect illustration of real life. And what I mean by that is if you watch the first Star Wars movie, the good guys all get together, they go, they blow up the Death Star, they win, and they all get medals at the end, and everybody's cheering. You watch The Empire Strikes Back, nobody wins. The good guys get away by the skin of their teeth. One of them is frozen, one of them loses his hand, the other one gets his Cloud City taken off him. The bad guys don't even win. I think that's a bit more real life. Sometimes that's how it is, and it does not sit well, especially when we're hurting like hell. So it's really, what does the closure look like? The closure could be you're able to move on and have your best life. How that is, what that looks like, and how you go about that is entirely up to you. Again, with the right kind of support, it can be a bit easier. The other thing is, when it comes to moving on, because I'm mindful of the time here, um, healing, closure, things like that, it's a journey. It's a process. It's a step at a time. We're going to have good days. We're going to have bad days. Sooner or later, you put into practice some of the things you learn from others, some of the things you learn from your therapy, some of the things you learn from watching different videos and things like that. You start applying some of those things, and sooner or later, you might begin to notice, because going back to the scale we were talking about earlier, what might have been an 8 at one point is now a 3. That's a good way to measure your progress. And it's your own handwritten evidence, by the way. Guys, this was my first time having a go at this. I'm sorry the camera's not working now. Again, it'll be all right in the night. I do apologize for that. So you've only got to hear my voice. I'm just interested, just as we're coming to an end, has there been anything useful for you tonight? And is this something you might like me to continue to do in future? If I were to pick a topic from, lots of questions that I get that I can't always put into videos and maybe talk about it. The answer is 42, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Yeah. The answer is 42. It's also my favorite band when I was a teenager, Level 42. Folks, a lot of stuff I was talking about tonight are just things I've picked up over the years, things I've read. Sometimes I would work with people, I would use these things. Um, should have said this at the beginning, said at the end, the things we're talking about, it's not a substitute for therapy. They're things that might help you. Things might work for you, things might not. And again, everybody's different. I would encourage you, if you are struggling, do reach out. Talk to a therapist. Get involved in some kind of support group. There's even on YouTube, there's other people that do channels, and they have forums, they have little things they do. it's the thing. I keep saying I live in the analog age. I still struggle with digital, and I'm still trying to figure out how YouTube works. If I could figure out how to do things like that, I might do something like that at some point in the future. But if you find this helpful, um, if you found anything useful in this, and if it's something you might like me to continue doing, then I can't promise I can do this all the time. But what I might do is I might maybe set one night a week, maybe once a fortnight or something like that. Because I don't think it would be fair to just do it randomly here and there whenever suits me. I would have to set a time. It wouldn't be fair on you folk. Well, thank you, Darren. I always do. Listening and not looking at faces suits me fine. Well, if you've seen my face, it's probably done you. It's probably better. You don't have to look at me. Yeah, I will maybe do something like that. We'll maybe do something like once a fortnight. I'll pick a night during the week and I'll set it this time because I'm aware that, again, thing about the internet, there's people watching me from, different parts of the world. So it's not 8 o'clock at night everywhere for everybody. So we'll take it from there. Listen, everybody, I really do appreciate your coming on tonight. I do appreciate your support. I appreciate your questions, and I'm sorry. Or as a level 42 fan, I'd say there's something about you, Darren, from another Darren. Well, do you know what? The other Darren, that is the song that actually got me into them. I used to listen to them. They were on the radio. I liked them, love games, things like that. That song, the first time I heard Boone Gould, that guitar solo it still is to me one of the most amazing pieces of guitar work ever. Absolutely wonderful. And I was just hooked, and I was into them since. Broke my heart when he left the band, but still. Listen, folks, it's been lovely. I do appreciate your support. I'm glad you got something out of this. And we will do this again. I will come back to you all. I will pick a night, and it will be 8 p.m. UK time, and I'll make it a regular thing. Okay? Take care, folks. Thanks again. Bye.